Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review. It's actually a much anticipated review and it comes twofold. One is that this just made my This Is Not a Top 10 2017 video, so you can go check that out on the channel if you're interested in those long form list type videos. The second thing is my brother from another mother, Rich Mitch, is considering buying a bottle of this. So I figured I'm going to review it for you, Rich, and all of you out there on Fragcom who are interested in sort of a different take than what you usually hear on this particular fragrance. And today it's going to be from the house of Creed, everyone's favorite house. This is called Viking. Now, a couple things about Viking that I have to discuss. It's impossible to discuss Viking without talking about this. I am one who is not afraid to go against the grain. You guys know that. Actually, I'm probably in my natural state being a contrarian and going against the grain. And if something is shite, I will call it shite. I have proven that over and over on this channel. If you've watched many of my 850 plus videos, you know that there are a lot of times where I will call shit out. I will offend people. That's just, it's in my nature. I can't help myself. But there is another side to the story. And that's that in Fragcom, when everyone hates something or when everyone loves something, sometimes there is a huge amount of pressure for reviewers or, you know, people who just follow along and leave comments in live streams or whatever it is to conform. It just is. That's just the way, you know, it's partly fragrance and this is also partly human nature that we're dealing with here. And so on YouTube, if you go look up Viking, when Viking first came out in 2017, Creed sent many of the reviewers these little like, it almost looked like a message in a bottle type, you know, like sample. And they sent it to the reviewers ahead of the release of Viking. And many of the reviews on YouTube, and there are a lot of them, okay, because they sent them to so many people. The hype for Viking was huge in 2017. And the reason it was so huge is because it was the first true masculine release since Aventus, and it was the first Creed put out for men that had the same type of Aventus design. The bottle of Viking, which I actually had a 100 ml bottle and ran through it, and then I ended up getting this flacon. I wish I would have kept that bottle, but I actually threw it away with the box. Stupid. Before I had a channel. Obviously, if I had the channel, I would have held on to it. But back then, I was like, I don't care. The juice is gone. Whatever. But I wish I had kept it so I could have showed you guys the bottle because it looks exactly like the Aventus bottle, but the black on the Aventus bottle with the lines is basically red, and where the sticker for the Aventus guy, Napoleon on the horse, is basically a Viking ship, okay, and it says Viking. And so because people saw the design being like Aventus, they saw this and they just went absolutely insane. Everyone in Fragcom was talking about Viking and how excited they were to try it. And then literally people smelled it and they just kind of went, whatever, who cares? Bye, next thing. And there were so many reviews that just shit all over Viking. And so why I'm bringing all this up is that I'm actually in the contrarian camp, if you will. I am one of the people who actually has come to really like and in fact love Viking. And that does take some courage as well. When everyone is saying something shit, to stand up and say, no, actually I like this. That's how it has to be. I mean, there has to be people who tell their truth one way or the other. Bad, but also good when everyone else says something is bad. So, like I said, many didn't like it, and my story is a little different from many of the reviews you see on YouTube because many of them are just off of a tiny sample. Or maybe not a tiny sample, but like a discovery atomizer type thing that Creed made for them, right? And so maybe they sent them like 5 or 10 mils or something to try it. And so many people just sprayed it and did a video really quick. They didn't really spend time with it. It was just the initial impression. And I think the initial impression was so off because they were expecting Aventus Part 2. And what they got was Viking, which is almost like a high-end luxury niche version of Old Spice. It just is. There's no getting around it. And it's funny because, like I said, I loved it so much after using that first 100 mils that I ended up buying this is a 500 ml flacon, and you can see how much of the juice is missing out of the flacon. Now, not all of this is gone because I decanted it in this little bad boy so I can just spray away. And then I have this decanter if I want to bring it with me. Because Viking is one of those scents that I do like to apply periodically throughout the day. And we'll talk about kind of why that is. And the other thing that I did when I bought Viking, it was twofold. I bought it as soon as it came out. Okay, blind buy. Bought a 100 ml bottle. And I can tell you that I got the 2017 first batch when it first came out. And whenever I went to go buy another bottle years later, probably sometime around the pandemic, I think I ran through that 100 ml bottle in like 2 years. I absolutely loved it. And I love just liberally applying Viking. The way I wear Viking is I really layer it on thick. Okay, I put it on thick because I usually wear Viking in the spring and the summer, and I'll talk about why I think it works so well then as the review kind of goes on. But when I went back to buy my flacon, the reason I pulled the trigger on this at the time, Viking was so underhyped that I got this for like $600, right? I got 500 mils for $600. 100 ml at retail right now is $495. So do the math. But this is 17U01. So this is a 2017 batch as well. That's the other reason why I was like, that's it. I'm grabbing it. Because number one, I decided I never wanted to be without it. And number two, I was very fearful of Creed's reformulation potential because they had just gotten purchased by BlackRock at the time. And I was like, oh shit, I have no clue what's going to happen. Like BlackRock has never even been in the fragrance business. And then, of course, now BlackRock sold Creed to Kering. I have a video on that on the channel. And now they're starting to really pump out fragrances. I mean, like, pumping them out. And I haven't tried any of the new stuff, but I hear it's shite. So let's read the blurb, and let's talk about why I love Viking so much. So here's kind of the blurb from the brand. It's actually not a very good blurb, to be honest with you, but they describe it as a spicy fougere, aromatic and fresh, a bold and fiery men's fragrance. Viking bottles the fearless spirit of boundless exploration for the modern man who goes against the grain. That is literally the blurb. It says, Viking Eau de Parfum celebrates the powerful, fearless, and fiery modern man. This bold men's fragrance combines fresh citrus notes of Calabrian bergamot and Sicilian lemon with pink peppercorn, Bulgarian rose, and peppermint. Woody-based notes of Indian sandalwood and Haitian vetiver complete this masculine masterpiece. That is what is on the Creed website. They call it a symbol of voyage and undeniable perseverance. I actually like the original blurb a little bit better, which when it first came out, it said, Viking, a fiery men's fragrance that bottles the fearless spirit of boundless exploration for the modern man who goes against the grain, inspired by the incredibly crafted longships, a centerpiece of the Viking age and one of the greatest design feats of the 9th century, a symbol of voyage and undeniable perseverance. Longships were carefully designed for the skilled seamen who embodied unbridled determination to conquer. Viking marks the brand's first major scent release since the induction of the cult best-selling Aventus in 2010. So some people have given Creed a little bit of a hard time for missing kind of an easy trick here, because apparently the Vikings, when they did their conquering, they used oak longships, is my understanding. I think it's oak, but I'm not a historian. Do not quote me on that. But there's no oak in here. It would have been cool if they would have incorporated some of that in. But they do use a sandalwood and cedarwood combination, which kind of gives a little bit of a Viking ship type vibe, I guess, but maybe not in the proper historical aspect. It would have been cool to see an oak note in here, but I digress. So that's the blurb. And so what does Viking basically really smell like to me? Well, there are many parts of Viking, but the opening is, the way I would describe it is basically just pure energy. So for me, Viking is this energetic hit, all right? It's almost like, even though it's an eau de parfum, Viking opens up with this huge feeling of this zesty, energetic, eau de cologne style almost fragrance for me. So it's almost like this liveliness, this vitality, this youth, this youthful vigor, this zesty sort of energy in a bottle to go conquer, as they say, the world. And that is one of my favorite parts about the fragrance. Actually, I'm going to do a fresh sort of spray just because I want to experience the opening again, although I really know this fragrance literally like the back of my hand. And so it opens up, I mean, instantly you're just hit with this unbelievable freshness from multiple different types of citruses. There is Sicilian lemon, there's Calabrian bergamot. In the normal Creed loves Calabrian bergamot, and orange. Those are the three trio of citruses that you're going to get in the opening. And it opens up so fresh and vibrant and slightly green, but lots of spicy pink pepper in the opening. The pink pepper grows a little bit to a crescendo, but the pink pepper is supposed to be reminiscent of this fiery brand that they're discussing. You know, I just imagine, you know, men with long beards. Just if you've ever seen this show Viking, I mean, I think that's literally the idea that they were probably going for. And it's mixed with peppermint and absinthe. So you basically get two greenish type notes. And the two green notes add a little bit of a slightly boozy element because of the absinthe. Some people will talk about the slight boozy element in the top. But for me, pink pepper is not a note that many people get excited about. I'll tell you that. I mean, it's ubiquitous in perfumery. It is just across the spectrum. Many designers use pink pepper, but I have to say, as far as a fragrance that does a proper pink pepper note, reference pink pepper fragrance, which is something no one ever asked for, I'll tell you what, Viking actually hits the mark here because it's so sort of rosy and slightly spicy, and maybe they've used pink and black pepper, I don't know. But the pink pepper really stands out. It could also be the pimento kind of blending in, but it just gives this rosy, I mean, fiery is actually a really good word. Although, when I think of fiery pepper, I think of Sichuan pepper, like the Amouage Journeyman review that I did. That is a reference Sichuan pepper note. In Viking, you get a little bit of a fiery aspect because it's almost like fire and ice. All right, that's a good way to describe it. And I think that was part of the advertising campaign in the beginning when they released Viking. I remember seeing bottles that were like stuck in what seemed like the snow, or stuck in what seemed like, you know, the ice of Iceland or something, you know. And so it was like this fiery red Viking bottle offset against this sort of icy coolness. And that's the peppermint. And so you have this fire from the pink pepper feeling, but you also have the coolness of the peppermint. And instantly you're probably thinking of old school, masculine, traditional fragrances. Barbershop fougères come to mind. There is definitely a little bit of a barbershop element in here. Definitely, 100%. You cannot get away from it. But it's very modernized, okay? And when you mix that slight booziness from the absinthe with the beautiful citruses, and if there's anything that Creed does well, it is they make fresh, easy-to-wear fragrances. They just do. That's why many people list Creed as like the first niche stop. So when you go from designers to niche fragrances, many people go straight to Creed because it's so easy to accept their fragrances and wear them and just spray them on and enjoy what you're smelling. There's very little challenging fragrances when it comes to Creed, but there are definitely some moving parts to Viking. And the thing about Viking that I would really like to know is who the hell made it. Who made Viking? Because, you know, we know that that Pierre Bourdon sort of disciples helped create some of my favorite creeds. So, for example, Julien Rasquinet did Royal Oud, and Jean-Christophe Herault did Aventus, who is a, you know, both of them are basically disciples of Pierre Bourdon, right? Who made many of your favorite creeds from the 80s. And so not to go too far off on that tangent, but they released the name of the creator of Aventus eventually, and they released the name of the creator of Royal Oud and all that good stuff. And we know Pierre Bourdon did a lot of stuff in the 80s and 90s. And Green Irish Tweed and stuff like that is openly accredited to Pierre Bourdon. There's a brilliant book out called The Ghost Perfumer if you want to learn more about this topic. It's a very fascinating read. Even if you're not into perfume the way I am, it's a very fascinating read. But no one has said anything about Viking. I would love to know who the hell made this. I would be very interested to know if it stayed with that Pierre Bourdon lineage or if they went with a completely different perfumer for this one. I would be very interested to know. The other thing I have to make a distinction between while I'm thinking about it before I forget, because I will forget, is Viking and Viking Cologne and Aventus Cologne, to me, are two completely, well, really four completely separate fragrances. Viking Cologne is one of the worst things I've ever smelled in my life. Aventus Cologne is absolutely horrendous. It smells like Mancera and Montal teamed up to do a Aventus take. I despise Aventus Cologne. And you know what's funny is I was such an Aventus fan that when it came out, I reached out to the brand of Creed and I was like, hey, can you send me a sample? Because I'm seriously thinking about buying it. And I was just like, what in the hell is this? So I hate their colognes. Hate them. Despise them. But Viking, I absolutely love. So there's definitely that give and take. You really have to walk a line with what you like and what you don't like. So the citruses, the freshness, that's really Creed's bread and butter as far as I'm concerned, and they knock it out of the park here. It's fresh, it's woody, it's green, it's citrusy, it's these amazing contrasts between fire and ice. And if you've seen stories of old timers kind of drinking absinthe, if you will, it was very popular back in the day to put like a sugar cube in your absinthe, right? And so this wears like you're literally on the Mayflower, the maiden journey to America, and you're hauling crates of sugar and spice and everything nice, and waves from the sea come up and they batter the boat. And in fact, they batter them so much that they kind of maybe splosh overboard a little bit and get onto the actual crates that are holding these spices. And so just imagine these sea-soaked boxes, okay? And just imagine that the soaking leaves behind from the sea is almost like this briny, salty sludge from the sea. And that is one of the most important parts of Viking is, yes, they're obviously going for the rough and tumble Viking man, but also maybe like you take a Viking, you shave him up, you put him in a $5,000 Enya suit, and you send him on his way, right? So there's a little bit of fire and ice, right? Bristle and brine, and also that barbershop sort of very likable element to it, right? But part of what's making the Creed smell high class to me is that salty sludge left behind from the sea, which should instantly remind you of ambergris, okay? There's no getting around it. But this is not an aquatic. That's the thing. I would not call this an aquatic at all. This has no calone. This has no oceanic. Well, it has no aquatic notes. Let's put it that way. There are some fragrances that use an ambergris accord that use it with aquatic or marine-like notes, right? Like think about something like Millésime Impériale by Creed or something like that. There's definitely marine vibes there. That was the 90s, right? That was what was popular back then. This is completely different. Yes, it uses the ambergris to kind of hint, I think, at that salty, briny sludge. But I don't know if Creed's using real ambergris here, or whether it is sort of the in-house Creed salty ambroxan. It was interesting because somebody said when I reviewed Opus 7 yesterday, or a couple days ago, Reckless Leather, someone left a comment and said they got a chance to personally talk to Christopher Chong, and he said the first run, the early batches of Opus 7 had real ambergris in them, and then they switched to ambroxan, or whatever their salty ambroxan replacement is, right? And so for some people who for the folks who are like, reformulations are never a thing, you guys are crazy, I think they're out of their minds. I mean, reformulations are a huge thing nowadays, and they happen. It's just a reality of the situation. You cannot get away from it for two things. Number one, the brands want to save money, period. End of story. It's a money game. Number two, IFRA and reformulating things to stay current with or the European Cosmetic Commission, or whatever the hell those crazy folks in Europe are. But I think Creed has basically mastered, as far as you can truly master it with a brand like Creed, that salty ambroxan accord that they've created. Obviously, you want to smell some actual amazing ambergris, smell some of the Ensars or some of the Aries Ladores or some of the other fragrances in that category that I've discussed. I actually did a top 77 artisanal countdown. If you want to learn about some of those artisanal fragrances, check that video out. But here, I think they've done a very good job of sort of beautifully mixing in the spices, the clove, the pimento, with that seaside, briny, left behind, almost like the sea has come in, and when the sea washed away, it left some of that salty undertone right there on the wood of the ship itself, and the wood boxes and the spices, and maybe a little bit of florals. There is some jasmine and Bulgarian rose, which I think the rose is a little bit more prominent than the jasmine, but there are some florals in here, but it's not sort of, it's not something that's going to put you off. If you don't like white florals or anything like that, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, Rich. So now, one thing that I have to mention is this lavandin note. So if you look now, it says lavender, but originally when it came out, Creed was advertising the fact that they used lavandin, which is basically like anytime you mix two lavenders together, it basically is known as lavandin, bastard lavender, whatever you want to call it. There's many names for it. But it's supposed to have a coarser, rough and tumble, harsher. It's supposed to be not as smooth as proper lavender. And most lavender nowadays is actually lavandin because it's cheaper to use. But I think Creed used it on purpose here to give that fiery side, right? We just got off of a Viking ship, right? We didn't come out of a spa. We didn't come out of a sauna. We're Vikings, right? They gave it a little bit of that harsher, elements to it, right? The rougher side of the Vikings. Before they put on the $5,000 Enya suits, right? The rougher side. And so it's interesting because the Devilman, who I definitely respect, I really respect his opinions, even though we completely disagree on many topics when it comes to perfume, I really, truly respect the Devilman's opinions. And he said that he calls these type of fougères, nougères, a nougère. And I got to give him his credit there because that's a pretty good way to put it. I've heard this referred to as a modern fougère. I've heard it referred to as a neo-fougère. I've heard it referred to as all kind of different names. But the lavender / lavandin in here definitely gives it a little bit of that fougère vibe, just a little bit. It does have tonka bean as well. It does not have geranium, but it has a lot of elements of a fougère in here, but very modernized, if you will. And so just take that salty, sour, acidic, briny, ambergris accord, whatever you want to call it, and mix it with everything else that I've been telling you. So here's basically the fragrance, if you can stay with me, and imagine blending some of these parts together like I've discussed. You basically have Viking, okay? And so Creed is going to use their base of Indian sandalwood, like I discussed, that creamy, smooth sandalwood that Creed is known for. If you've smelled any Creeds, I mean, you're familiar with it. Bois de Portugal, Silver Mountain Water, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Creed loves using that creamy sort of sandalwood with their in-house either ambergris or ambroxan, salty ambroxan, whatever the hell it is. But that combination is so Creed. And when you mix it with the citruses and a little bit of a twist, with the peppermint, the fire and ice, pink pepper and all that stuff, a little bit of the boozy absinthe, if you will. And if you can just imagine blending these all together, and then finally taking a page out of Roja's book. And in 2017, Roja was really just starting to blow up. So I don't know if they really took a page out of his book then, but it's possible. And I'm often saying, I often say that Roja's something up. Like he takes something and he makes it sort of fancy by using high-end ingredients. And in reality, I guess you could flip that script and say Roja took a book out of Creed's book a page out of Creed's book, because Creed was the one that was doing that with Pierre Bourdon's work. Pierre Bourdon would turn over the work to Olivier Creed, apparently, and he would take it and just replace everything with the highest quality sandalwood, the highest quality ambergris, the highest quality this, and bam, sell it for extra money. And no other house was doing that at the time but Creed. They used to make fun of Creed because the whole point in the fragrance game was to minimize costs and put out a fragrance at a respectable budget. And here he was releasing something that was 5 times the budget. And the perfumers used to laugh. But in reality, he was onto something. That luxury market was just coming up. And so Roja took a book took a page out of Creed's book. But I think with this is one of the first time I've ever said it feels like Creed really creeded something up, if you will, because it really does feel like they've added some orris butter, some high quality ambergris smell, and they've taken that Old Spice DNA and they've creeded it up. They did. And you know what? It works. It really does work. I hate to say it. And what's even more funny, now that we have time on our side to look back at 2017. In 2017, everyone was shitting all over Viking. Now here we sit in 2024. Old Spice is discontinued officially now. If you guys don't know that, it is an absolute travesty, tragedy, whatever you want to call it. So Old Spice is discontinued. And we have Creed Viking in what I would say is a fantastic substitute. I love the way Viking Viking does have transitions, but it really almost more like rocks, like a ship rocking on the sea. And some of the notes just come out. It almost seems like a ship leaving the harbor. They just enter the sea as these notes start to appear. It's almost like you've got like a part of your ships who were originally sailing as part of your entourage, and they got lost because back then there wasn't GPS. and all of a sudden they reappear out of the fog, and everyone's like, yeah, they're alive, you know? It just has this, the way that the notes kind of enter, like right now I'm getting a little bit of that Bulgarian rose. It's beautiful. To me, it's an absolutely stunning fragrance. Now, biggest downside for me is performance. And to be fair, longevity is not necessarily an issue. And I'm not one to talk about performance. I never talk about performance. Hardly ever, ever do I talk about performance, okay? Mostly because I just reapply. I don't care. I have so much perfume that I just reapply. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not worrying about an extra couple sprays or reapplying or anything like that. But I will say that even though this thing lasts 8 hours, I wore this to work yesterday in anticipation of doing this review, and I wasn't ready to do it yesterday, so I waited until today. And I'm wearing it again as my scent of the day. And so yesterday, though, when I was wearing it to work, I noticed that it lasted all 8 hours, okay? So the whole time I was at work, I could smell it. Even though when I got in the car at the end of the day, it was very, very faint, I could still pick it up. But it very quickly, you know, that spray I just did, it's not a huge projector. And so I think that's one of the reasons, another reason why people gave this a hard time, twofold. They considered it as old manish, which I disagree. I think it's elegant and classy. And the second thing is it doesn't project. It's not this modern Ambroxan bomb or anything like that. It doesn't have amber woods or anything like that. But it does sometimes wear a little close to the skin. It wears like a second skin, if you will. Like you literally dipped your hand in the ocean, and what came out was what was Viking, right? So you dip your hand in the ocean, and now you smell like Viking. But I think it wears like that on purpose. I don't think this is supposed to be the new Sauvage or anything like that. People who are going to pay $500 a bottle for this are not trying to smell like the kid at the mall wearing Sauvage, right? They want to smell different. And so this is targeted to the executives, to the businessmen, to that segment of society. For me, that's what it feels like to me. You know, it really feels like a reminiscent of your grandfather's fragrance from Old Spice. And even though performance is like I said, 8 hours or so, the first hour or so, it really projects okay, and you get a lot of sillage and stuff like that, but it starts very quickly fading into what I would consider to be a skin scent. And so for me, someone can still smell it if they come into your bubble, but you're not gonna. I don't think you're going to, you know, be super impressed by what you smell like. If you're someone who loves just sitting there and breaking a fragrance down all day, if you're that kind of guy, after 4 or 5 hours, you'll probably be ready to reapply. And that's exactly how I wear Viking. So when I wear Viking, I wear it like an eau de cologne, because I kind of want that barbershop hit of freshness with the peppermint and the blend of lavendin, that, you know, rough and tumble side of the Viking's personality contrasted with the barbershop element. But I wear it like an eau de cologne, which is basically reapplying the damn thing every 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours, whenever I remember, right? I'll bring a decant with me and I'll just reapply, because I love that opening. And if you work in an office like I do, and you want something that sort of gives you like energy to do whatever the hell the next thing on your agenda is, Viking is a fantastic scent for that. Like if you make this like your work scent, this could easily be a signature scent for work, because it has that spicy, fresh, energizing feel. Like when you spray it on, you're ready to conquer the world. And then as it starts to dry down, it gets to the classy, smooth, you know, I don't know what you would call it, but I guess, you know, this velvety smooth, almost like oil sitting on top of like the water, like an oil spill. You know how the oil just kind of floats on top of the water? That's how Viking wears on your skin. It just kind of floats there. And sometimes I wish it was stronger, but then I understand that, you know what? It is not made to be that kind of fragrance. And I love Viking for what it is. I've come to love Viking for what it is. So that is kind of my take. 30 minutes of a ramble on a much maligned and hated Creed fragrance, Creed Viking. So if you have experience with this bad boy, do let me know. If you've tried other batches other than the 2017 batch, which I have, and it's the only ones I've ever tried, because my 100 ml bottle was 2017 as well. I don't know about reformulation issues. I don't know anything about it. I just fear the reformulation. So I went with the OG. But if anyone has tried newer modern bottles and they've compared it to the original 2017, do let me know. I know that this inspired a ton of clones and, you know, not necessarily copies, but maybe inspired by fragrances. But yeah, if you're into these type of mature, classy scents, Viking is fantastic for professional events, work events, meetings, whatever it is. You know, it really does have that, like I said, vibrant, energetic, youthful, that exuberance of youth, right? They're going to get off the long ships and they're going to conquer that land that they landed on, right? And that's kind of the idea that they were going for. So I like it. I am, again, against the grain. I know everyone hates this fragrance, but I actually really like Viking. But I hate Viking cologne. So, you know, be careful. Don't get Viking cologne, in my opinion, or Aventus cologne. Go for the OGs. They're the ways to go. So that's my take. Let me know what your thoughts are if you have experience with Viking. What you think about the House of Creed, what you think about them being sold twice in the last like 4 years. Love the feedback, love the back and forth as always. Love doing these videos for you guys. Thank you to everyone who supports me and the channel. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.